For 36 years, I held everyone else's babies. I changed thousands of diapers. I watched my sisters walk down the aisle, and I stayed behind. The world called me Cinderella. They said I was the daughter who would never leave home. There were nights I wondered if my turn would ever come. There were prayers I cried into my pillow when the house was finally quiet. But God is never late. He is just preparing the perfect gift. On December 30th, my world stopped turning. We kept it a secret for weeks because I just wanted to hold him close just for us. But today, the silence ends. I am not just Jana Duggar anymore. I am a mother. Please meet the love of my life, Archie Gerald Wissmann. This isn't just a baby announcement. This is the story of my waiting, my fear, and the miracle that proved that every single second of the wait was worth it. Sit down with me. I have so much to tell you. Arsh, if you have followed my family for any length of time, you know my story. Or at least, you think you do. For years, I was the girl in the background. I was the one holding the babies, organizing the pantry, fixing the garden, and smiling for the cameras while my younger sisters packed their bags and started their own lives. People on the internet gave me a nickname. They called me Cinderella. I saw the comments. I read the articles. They painted a picture of me as this tragic figure, stuck in the big house in Arkansas, waiting for a Prince Charming who lost his way. It hurts to read those things sometimes, not because they were entirely true, but because they touched on a fear I kept hidden very deep inside my heart. The truth is, I wasn't just waiting, I was living. I loved my garden, I loved my greenhouse. I loved being there for my siblings, but there is a specific kind of silence that fills a room when you are the oldest and you are still single. I watched Jill get married, then Jessa, then Jinger, then Joy. Even the boys, one by one, they found their partners. I remember sitting at those weddings, fixing the bride's train, holding her bouquet, and feeling this mixture of immense joy for them and a quiet, aching question for God. Lord, did you forget me? I spent my 20s and half of my 30s wondering if marriage and motherhood were simply not in my cards. Maybe my calling was just to serve others. Maybe I was meant to be the aunt, never the mother. I tried to make peace with that. I really did. I poured my love into my nieces and nephews. I changed thousands of diapers that weren't for my own children. I rocked babies to sleep who would go home to another woman's arms. But the desire never went away. It is a very human thing to want to be chosen, to want a home that is yours, to want to look into a baby's eyes and see your own reflection. So, while the world called me Cinderella and pitied me, I was in my room on my knees, praying for a future I couldn't yet see. I didn't know it then, but those years of waiting were building a reservoir of gratitude in me. God was making me wait so that when the blessing finally came, I wouldn't just appreciate it, I would treasure it with every fiber of my being. And then there was Stephen. It's funny how life works. You can search for years and find nothing, and then, when you least expect it, everything aligns. I had known the Wissmann family for a long time. We had crossed paths over the years. But I hadn't really seen him, and he hadn't really seen me until the timing was right. When Stephen and I started talking seriously, it felt different than any courtship I had seen my siblings go through. It wasn't loud. It wasn't for a TV show. It was quiet. It was steady. Stephen is a man of few words, but his actions speak so loudly. He didn't care about the TV show. He didn't care about the Duggar fame or the drama that sometimes surrounds my family. He just saw Jana. He saw the woman who loved plants, who loved coffee, who wanted a simple life. We kept our relationship very private for a reason. After living my whole life under a microscope, I wanted something that was just ours. I wanted to fall in love without millions of people critiquing our body language or analyzing our hugs. I remember the moment I realized he was the one. It wasn't a grand gesture. We were just sitting and talking about the future, about what we wanted a family to look like. And for the first time in 34 years, I didn't feel anxious. I felt safe. I realized that God hadn't forgotten me. He was just saving me for a man who would treat me with such gentleness. Stephen was the calm to my chaos. He was the answer to every tear I had cried during those long, lonely years. Getting married was a whirlwind, but the biggest adjustment wasn't the wedding itself. It was what happened after. I packed up my room in Arkansas, the room I had shared with my sisters for decades, the house where I had lived my entire life, and I moved to Nebraska. Moving states might seem like a small thing to some people, but for me, it was monumental. I was leaving the safety net. I was leaving my parents, my twin brother John, David, and the daily rhythm of the big house. Nebraska is beautiful. It's open, it's windy, and it's quiet. Those first few months as a wife were a culture shock in the best way possible. I remember waking up in our house and realizing it was just us. There were no camera crews. There were no little siblings running down the hall screaming. It was just silence. And Stephen, I had to learn how to cook for 2 people instead of 20. Do you know how hard that is? I kept making huge pots of soup out of habit, but in that quietness, I found myself. I wasn't Jana the sister, mom anymore. I was just Jana the wife. I started to dream new dreams. I started to decorate my own living room without asking for permission. I planted my own garden in Nebraska soil. It felt like I was finally exhaling after holding my breath for 30 years. But as we settled in, a new desire started to grow. The house was peaceful, but maybe, just maybe, it was a little too quiet. Oh, of course! The moment the wedding photos were posted, the question started. Is she pregnant yet? She's 34. She better hurry up. Does she know her biological clock is ticking? I tried to ignore the comments, but it's hard. In our culture, and honestly in society in general, people expect a baby immediately after the wedding. And because of my age, the pressure felt heavier. I knew the statistics. I knew that having a first baby in your mid-30s is considered geriatric by doctors, which, by the way, is a terrible term. I felt the clock ticking inside my own body. Every month that passed, I would wonder, is this the month I try to play it cool? I told Stephen, let's just enjoy being married. And we did. We traveled a little, we worked on the house. But in the back of my mind, there was this lingering fear. What if the waiting wasn't over? What if I had waited this long for a husband, only to find out I couldn't give him a family? It's a very lonely place to be, worrying about fertility. You smile at church when people ask, any news yet? And you say, not yet, just trusting God. But inside, you are calculating dates and wondering if you did something wrong. I wanted to be a mother so badly, but I was terrified of getting my hopes up only to be crushed. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember the light was coming through the bathroom window in a very specific way. I had been feeling off. just a little more tired than usual. My coffee didn't taste right, but I didn't want to overthink it. I had convinced myself it was just allergies or stress. But Stephen had left for work, and I was alone in the house. I decided to take a test, just to rule it out, just to stop my mind from spinning. I took the test, set it on the counter, and walked away. I actually started folding laundry because I didn't want to stand there and stare at it. I was protecting my heart. I was preparing myself to see just one line. After a few minutes, I walked back into the bathroom. I picked it up, 2 lines. When it was there, pink, undeniable. My knees actually gave out. I sat down on the bath mat and just stared at it. The silence in the house was deafening, but my heart was pounding like a drum. I started to cry. Not the pretty kind of crying. I was sobbing. I was 35 years old. I was finally going to be a mom. I touched my stomach. There was nothing there yet, no bump, no movement. But I knew he was there. In that moment, the years of Cinderella, the years of waiting, the years of watching everyone else have their turn, none of it mattered. It all faded away. All that mattered was those 2 pink lines. I sat there for an hour, just holding the test, thanking God, and wondering how in the world I was going to wait until Stephen got home to tell him. Once the shock wore off, Stephen and I made a decision. We decided to keep this little life a secret for as long as we possibly could. For my entire childhood and young adulthood, my life was a press release. Every courtship, every wedding, every baby, it was content. It belonged to the world before it belonged to us. I didn't want that for my pregnancy. I didn't want the tabloids zooming in on my stomach before I was even ready to say the words out loud. So I went into hiding. Well, sort of. I stopped posting full body photos on Instagram. I started wearing Stephen's sweatshirts. I became the queen of creative angles. It was actually kind of fun. Like we had this precious little secret that the rest of the world knew nothing about. There were close calls, of course. People would see me at the grocery store here in Nebraska and look a little too long at my midsection. I would just pull my coat tighter and smile. Those months of silence were some of the most peaceful months of my life. It allowed me to bond with the baby without thousands of strangers giving me advice I didn't ask for. It allowed Stephen and me to pray over this child in the quiet of our own home. I learned that privacy isn't just about hiding, it's about protecting. I was protecting the peace that I had waited 36 years to find. But with the silence came the fear. I can't talk about this journey without being honest about the anxiety. I am 36 years old. In the medical world, that puts a label on you. Geriatric pregnancy, advanced maternal age. When I went to my first doctor's appointment, they laid out all the risks. They talked about blood pressure. They talked about genetic testing. They talked about how things are different when you're older. I remember sitting in the car after that appointment, gripping the steering wheel, just terrified. I had watched my sisters have babies in their early 20s. Their bodies just seemed to bounce back. Everything seemed so easy for them. But here I was, feeling every single ache, every wave of nausea, and wondering if my body could actually do this. I had nightmares about losing him. I think when you wait this long for something, you live in constant fear that it's too good to be true. That someone is going to pinch you and you'll wake up back in the girls' room in Arkansas, single and waiting. I had to really lean on Stephen during those weeks. He would hold my hand and remind me that age is just a number and that God wouldn't bring us this far just to leave us. Hearing the heartbeat for the first time, that fast, galloping rhythm, it was the only sound that could silence the fear in my head. Telling my parents was a moment I had rehearsed in my head 1,000 times. We flew back to Arkansas for a visit. I was nervous. My parents have a lot of grandkids. A lot. I think the count is somewhere in the 30s now, but I knew this one was different for them too. They had worried about me. We gathered everyone in the living room at the big house. It was chaotic as usual. Kids running everywhere. I handed my mom a small gift bag. Inside was a little onesie that said, "Worth the wait." I watched her pull it out. She looked at it, looked at me, and then looked at my stomach. And then my mom, who has seen everything, burst into tears. She hugged me so tight I thought she might squeeze the baby. My dad, Jim Bob, was beaming. He kept saying, "Praise the Lord. Jana, praise the Lord." To see my sister's reactions, Jill, Jessa, Jinger on FaceTime, they were screaming. They knew. They knew the lonely nights. They knew the tears. To have them celebrate me joining the mom club was healing in a way I can't even explain. I wasn't the babysitter anymore. I was one of them. Stephen, and I decided we wanted to find out the gender. I know some people wait, but I am a planner. I needed to know. We didn't do a big party with explosions or airplanes. That's not really our style. We just had the doctor write it down in an envelope, and we opened it together in our kitchen. Just us. I remember my hands shaking as I tore the paper. I pulled out the card. It's a boy, a son. I immediately pictured a little mini Stephen, a little boy helping me in the garden, a little boy running through the fields in Nebraska. I think subconsciously I had always pictured myself with a girl first because I grew up with so many sisters. But seeing that word boy, it felt right. It felt strong. I looked at Stephen, and he had the biggest grin on his face. He was going to have a son to carry on the Wissmann name. We hugged, and I whispered to my belly, "Hello, little man." That was the day he stopped being the baby and started being a person to me. Once we knew he was a boy, the nesting instinct kicked in hard. I have renovated so many spaces for other people. I've redesigned my parents' room, the guest house, the boys' room. But I had never designed a nursery for my own child. I walked into the spare room in our house, which was just filled with boxes, and I saw the potential. I didn't want it to be loud. I wanted it to be a sanctuary. I chose soft colors, blues, creams, natural wood, not the standard Duggar beige, but something warm and classic. Stephen built the crib. Watching your husband build the bed your son will sleep in, that does something to your heart. I spent hours in there. I would fold his tiny socks. They are so small, and put them in the drawer. Then I would take them out and fold them again, just to feel the fabric. I hung a picture on the wall that said, "For this child, I have prayed," because it's true. Every brushstroke of paint on those walls was a prayer. I was building a heaven for him, a place where he would know from his very first breath that he was wanted beyond measure. I think I underestimated how hard the end would be. I had watched my sisters go through pregnancy so many times. I thought I knew what to expect. I thought I've seen swollen ankles. I've seen the back pain. I'll be fine. But living it is a completely different story. By December, I felt huge. I know that's not the most poetic way to say it, but I felt like I was carrying a watermelon around my waist. My feet were so swollen that none of my shoes fit. I was wearing Stephen's slippers to church. There were nights I sat up in bed at 300 a.m. with heartburn that felt like fire, just crying. I was exhausted. My body, which I had always relied on to be strong and capable, to garden, to build, to work, suddenly felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. I remember calling Jessa one night and just asking, "How did you do this 4 times?" But then, amidst the discomfort, there were the kicks. I would be lying on the couch, feeling miserable, and suddenly I would see a little foot slide across my belly. It was the wildest, most beautiful feeling in the world. It was his way of saying, "I'm here, Mom. We're doing this together." We celebrated Christmas that year very quietly. It was just days before my due date. I sat by the tree, looking at the lights, realizing that by next Christmas, there would be a 1-year-old tearing open presents. I was physically done, but spiritually, I was so ready to meet him. December 29th started like any other Tuesday. I was actually in the kitchen trying to bake something because apparently I can't stop working even when I'm 9 months pregnant. I felt a twinge. I stopped. I held my breath. Was that it? A few minutes later, it happened again, but stronger. I walked into the living room where Stephen was reading. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, timing it in my head. When the third one hit, I looked at him and said, "Stephen, I think you need to pack the bag." The look on his face! He went from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. He was so focused. He started grabbing the checklist. "Do we have the car seat? Do we have your robe?" It's funny, in the movies, labor starts with water breaking and immediate screaming. For me, it was this slow, rolling intensity. We spent the afternoon pacing the house. I remember stopping to look out the window at the Nebraska snow, thinking, this is the last time I will look at this view as just a wife. When I come back, everything will be different. As the sun went down, the contractions got real. That's when the fear crept back in, the reality that this baby has to come out, and I have to be the one to do it. No, I know my family is famous for home births. My mom had most of us at home. My sisters have had home births. It's a beautiful tradition. But Stephen and I made a different choice. Because of my age, being 36, and because this was my very first baby, we decided the hospital was the safest place for us. I know some people might be surprised by that. Jana Duggar in a hospital, but honestly, after waiting this long, I wasn't willing to take even a 1% risk. I wanted the monitors. I wanted the doctors. I wanted to know that if anything went wrong, help was right there. The drive to the hospital was memorable. It was dark, it was cold, and every bump in the road felt like a mountain. Stephen drove like he was transporting a Fay-Burge egg. He kept reaching over to squeeze my hand between contractions. Walking into that hospital lobby, I felt small. It smelled like antiseptic. It was bright. It was so far removed from the cozy, homey births I had attended for my sisters. But as soon as the nurse strapped that monitor on my belly, and I heard that whoosh, whoosh, whoosh of his heartbeat, I knew we were in the right place. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just trying to be a mom who brought her baby home safely. Labor is humbling. There is no dignity in it. You are exposed, you are in pain, and you lose all sense of time. I labored for a long time. Hours turned into I don't even know. The pain was unlike anything I had ever imagined. I have a high pain tolerance. I've worked in construction, but this was a different beast. There were moments I wanted to give up. I looked at Stephen with tears running down my face and said, I can't do it. It hurts too much. And this is where I fell in love with my husband all over again. He didn't panic. He didn't look away. He stood right by the bed, wiped my forehead with a cool cloth, and whispered, You are doing it, Jana. He is almost here. You are so strong. He was my anchor. When the contractions washed over me like a tidal wave, he was the rock I held onto. We played worship music in the background. Great is thy faithfulness was playing on a loop. I focused on the lyrics. Morning by morning new mercies I see. I needed those mercies. By the time the doctor said it was time to push, I was exhausted. I felt like I had run a marathon, but then a switch flipped. The instinct took over. I realized I am the only person who can do this for him. It was December 30th, the very end of the year. The room was intense. Nurses were moving around. The doctor was giving instructions, but my world had shrunk down to just one focal point. I pushed with everything I had left. I prayed with every breath, and then relief, and then silence. For a split second, there was silence. My heart stopped. I looked at the doctor, and then the most beautiful sound I have ever heard in my entire life shattered the room. A cry. A loud, strong, angry cry. They lifted him up. He was warm. He was wet. He was screaming. They placed him on my chest, and I broke. I sobbed. I couldn't even see him clearly through my tears. I just kept saying, Hi, hi, baby. Hi. Stephen was crying too. We were a mess. I looked at his little face. He had dark hair. He had these tiny, perfect fingers. Archie Gerald Wissmann. He was 8 pounds, 5 ounces. He was perfect. In that moment, lying in that hospital bed, holding this warm, slippery bundle, 36 years of waiting made sense. Every lonely night, every question, every tear, it was the price of admission for this moment. And looking at him, I knew I would have waited 100 years if it meant I got to be his mom. People have been asking, how did you pick the name? Naming a human being is terrifying! You have to give them a title they will carry for the rest of their life. We went back and forth on so many names. For a while, we liked biblical names like Caleb or Noah, but nothing felt quite right. Then, Stephen suggested Archie. At first, I smiled. It sounded vintage. It sounded playful. But the more I said it, Archie Wissmann, the more it stuck. We looked up the meaning. Archie means truly brave or bold. For a boy born into this crazy world, I wanted him to be brave. I wanted him to have a name that sounded friendly but stood for strength. And then his middle name, Gerald. We wanted something strong to anchor the first name. Gerald feels timeless. It connects him to the generations before him. It's a name with roots. So, he isn't just Baby Wissmann. He is Archie Gerald, my brave little man. When I look at him now, I can't imagine him being named anything else. He just looks like an Archie, doesn't he? Those first 24 hours in the hospital were a blur of no sleep and pure adrenaline. The nurses talk about the golden hour, that first hour of skin-to-skin contact. We took that very seriously. I remember just lying there, shirtless, with a warm blanket over us, feeling his tiny chest rise and fall against mine. He smelled like heaven. You know that newborn smell? It's intoxicating. I spent hours just memorizing his face. I counted his eyelashes. I traced the curve of his ear. I looked for Stephen in his features, and I looked for myself. He has Stephen's nose, definitely. But I think he has my eyes. Or maybe my mom's eyes. It's too early to tell for sure, but we debate it constantly. It was in those quiet hours of the night when the hospital was silent and Stephen was dozing in that uncomfortable chair that the reality hit me. I am responsible for this life. This tiny, helpless human is entirely dependent on me. It was overwhelming, but in the most beautiful way possible. My heart felt like it had expanded 10 sizes in a single day. Leaving the hospital is the weirdest feeling. You walk in as a couple and you walk out as a family. They just let you leave. They don't give you a manual. They just wave goodbye and say, "Good luck with the human." Stephen drove even slower on the way home than he did on the way there. I sat in the back seat next to Archie, staring at the car seat, checking to make sure he was breathing every 10 seconds. Walking into our house in Nebraska felt different. The air felt different. We put the car seat down in the living room, and the dogs came over to sniff him. That was a moment. They were so gentle. But that first night, oh boy, nobody prepares you for the sleep deprivation. I thought I knew tired from raising my siblings, but when it's your baby crying at 200 a.m. and you are recovering from birth and your hormones are crashing, it is hard. Archie didn't want to be put down. He only wanted to be held. So Stephen and I took shifts. We sat in the rocking chair, watching the sun come up over the snowy fields, holding our son. We were exhausted, our eyes were burning, but we were smiling. We were finally home. Oh, since we are in Nebraska, the big introduction had to happen over FaceTime. I called the family group chat. When my mom's face popped up, followed by Jessa, Jill, Jinger, the screen was just a grid of chaos and excitement. I turned the camera to Archie. The screaming. I think we broke the speaker on my phone. He's so cute. Look at that hair. He looks just like Stephen, seeing my siblings, who I raised. Now looking at my baby, it was a full circle moment. My twin brother, John David, was just grinning. He didn't say much, but he didn't have to. We have always had that twin connection. He knows how much I wanted this. We are planning a trip back to Arkansas soon so everyone can meet him in person. I can't wait to see my dad, Jim Bob, holding Archie, and I can't wait to see him playing with his 30 cousins. He is going to have built-in best friends for life. With some music swells, emotional, cinematic, and inspiring string music by... As I close this video, I want to speak to one specific person. I want to speak to the girl who is watching this alone in her room. The woman who is 30 or 35 or 40 and feels like life has passed her by. I know you. I was you. I know what it feels like to be the Cinderella. I know what it feels like to smile at baby showers while your heart is breaking. I know the nights where you wonder if God is punishing you or if you are just unlovable. Please look at me. Look at Archie. I didn't get married until I was 34. I didn't become a mom until I was 36. By the world's standards, I was late. But by God's standards, I was right on time. If I had settled for the wrong guy in my 20s just to get a ring, I wouldn't have Stephen. If I had forced a path that wasn't mine, I wouldn't have Archie. Your story is not over. Just because your timeline looks different than your sister's or your friends doesn't mean it's broken. Don't give up hope. Don't close your heart. Keep planting your garden. Keep serving. Keep living. Because one day, When you least expect it, your miracle will arrive. And when it does, you will look back at the waiting and realize that it was just the preparation for the joy. Thank you for loving me through the years. Thank you for celebrating Archie with us. This isn't the end of my story. It's just the beginning. I'm Jana, and finally, I'm a mom